Hey, Keishan, thanks for joining us today as way of getting started. Give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Hey, Keishan Patel. I am a regional sales manager here for Splunk. Background is an interesting background in biomedical engineering, and then somehow ended up in sales.
Me too.
Um, right, so it was a good fallback, but I cover our strategic accounts on the sales side house at Splunk here, based
Cool.
in the Midwest.
Now, how do you go from biomedical engineering to
Yeah,
sales?
it's an interesting story there. I was finishing up school, and a buddy of mine was in software sales, and I had two offers coming out of college. One for Siemens, working 60, 70 hours behind a desk, no travel, and one for a small software company that I'd never heard of. Never knew what software sales was, but my first week of training was in Vienna, Austria, and that became a no-brainer
Yeah.
for me,
And
and
how'd you
then never
explain
looked
that
back.
to your parents?
That was an interesting one. They said, hey, once you studied 4.5 years, I said, you know what, let me try this out as a good fallback. Because I did, throughout college, I did a little bit of kind of the door-to-door sales. If you're
Oh,
familiar
okay.
with Amway,
Yep.
I did kind of MLM. Was and got the sales bug a little bit, but knew that wasn't what I wanted to do. But yeah.
So it sounds like the travel, the adventure, the
Yeah, I was very fortunate in my early career as a BDR. I traveled to Austria, Vienna. I traveled to Germany. We had a lot of travel involved as a inside sales rep
wow.
for a very small company. So, I think coming out of college, all that travel, just that excitement, going to events was kind of right out of the gate was awesome.
But what attracted you to biomedical then? Because that's typically kind of the introvert, brainiac
Right.
type thing.
Um, I was a very much of an introvert. I was very much, put me in a box, but I quickly realized amongst my peers,
That
I
doesn't
just
work.
thought it doesn't work. And I always, I started as kind of the later part of college. I started to kind of come out of, started reading a lot of personal development books, and money was what attracted me. The lifestyle, the way that people thought, the way that executives kind of commanded a room, and so that's really what started to draw me to wanting more, rather than I really liked leadership. Is kind of what got me into it,
Yeah.
and I saw
And
sales as a path to do that.
and that control over your income, was that?
That was a big piece. I always joke I got some expensive hobbies. I like to race cars, and so
Wow.
um, and I'm a big adrenaline junkie. So one of those things was like, all right, sales was what I contributed and what I brought to the table was really what drove me. It's kind of
And
like those school projects when you have one person doing the work, but everybody else gets the grade. It just didn't sit well with me.
no, no, and I can empathize with that. Now, how about the car racing? How'd you learn or become attracted to that?
I always had a um, just a love for cars, and what I really wanted to go to college for. So I didn't really choose my career path for college. That was not my choice. My choice was to go for business, to understand, kind of take that MBA route. And it ended up being, hey, if I was chasing a girl at the time, so they said go to, parents were like, hey, go be a biomedical engineer. And cars has always been one of those things growing up that I was always helping fixing cars with my dad, and so that just kind of, as a young teenager, burning rubber and just starting to get that need for speed.
Yeah.
Started going to some race events at the track, and that just started to snowball from there.
And it also sounds like you've got kind of an adventure edge to
Hmm.
you. That's the travel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the travel brought another perspective. I always love to see other cultures, because I think that's one of the biggest things, is just being able to see somebody else's perspective and the way that they see the world. Everybody has a reason for the way that they do things,
Yep.
and so being able to see that was. I got a chance to travel to Africa back in 2014. I got a chance to travel in many places just to see the world in a different view than what we're wired as humans and individuals.
And I think that's helpful in sales because people either look at the rejection as a learning experience, an opportunity, or they look at it personally like, oh, I'm not good. They don't
Right.
like me.
Yeah. I always took it as I have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Right. If they said no, it didn't mean no right now. It could have mean no, for another time. And the timing was off.
Yeah.
There's so many reasons that could have been a no. And beating yourself up about it was, you know what? It's almost thank you for not wasting my time, and I'm grateful for not wasting yours.
And your view of sales, did that change when you were doing the Amway thing? Because for people who don't grow up in a sales world,
Hmm.
you see TV, you see the movies, it's not exactly glamorous, right? It's
No, I think that the Amway piece, you know, I I didn't really enjoy the.
door to
I
door
learned
is
a lot,
rough.
right?
Yeah.
The door to door is rough, but as a college kid, I was able to make $7 grand a month, and it was as a college kid, that was
It's
you were kind
great
of the king
money.
of the college.
Yeah.
Um, but what taught me was the books that came associated with it of how to think, how to interact with individuals, and there was a lot of one-to-one human interaction and understanding what people's goals were, what they wanted to get out of it. Because at that time we weren't selling a product, we were selling a vision, right? Of being the entrepreneur, being able to give back and just have that extra income and having that perspective of what extra income did for families and for people, that made the world of a difference.
And what got you out of your shell as an introvert? Was it just you knew it wasn't going to serve you? You weren't going to have the life you wanted?
That's right.
No
Just
one was knocking on the dorm door. Hey, come
no
on
one was
out,
knock,
party.
no one was knocking out on the door. It was kind of a self reflection of there has to be some change here, right?
Yeah.
If you want something better, you have to kind of go and change the way you look at the world, the way what you read, what you put into your mind, etc. So that forced me to change that.
And when you got out of your comfort zone, did that excite you? Was that kind of an adrenaline rush or was it
It was
take a
nerve
while?
wracking. It was nerve wracking because
Yeah.
growth comes outside of that comfort zone. We've all heard that that saying, but at the first, when you first kind of take those baby steps, it becomes nerve wracking because you're really not sure if you're doing it right. But what I've learned is you just keep stumbling forward, and you'll find your groove.
Yeah. And how long did it take you to feel at home in B2B sales?
Um, so that's interesting because I took my sophomore year to my senior year of college doing Amway. Once my senior year of college came, I think I grew out of that shell and became kind of that extrovert. And once I was traveling to Vienna and once I was traveling to Germany, and I had friends that were kind of teaching me and showing me the ropes, that just kind of started to progress. And I would say probably took 7 months to move out of that BDR role.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so it was a very short time, but it was 2 years of kind of progressing that.
Yeah. And how did you adapt to the account exec role where it's multiple meetings? It's not a door to door sale where it's
Yeah.
transactional.
Yeah, a lot of so I was fortunate enough on the software side where the deals were long sales cycles.
Yeah.
So being that BDR role, I really took to being a part of every account meeting that I could be when I was setting meetings for my AE, and just learned of how they commanded the room. Try to learn from some of the best sales reps that made the seven-figure W-2s and what did they do and why were they so great. And I found a couple things that they did that was just above and beyond than what we're normally taught, right? Prospect, demo, POC, and that's not
That's
that's
not
not
the
how it
seven
goes.
figure
That's not the seven
formula,
figure
is
route,
it?
right? So
So what were those things that you noticed?
yeah, yeah, those things were, everyone comes in and does slides, everyone comes in and does demo, and what I noticed was it was more of a mindset shift on how these AEs approach the account. First, that they did a ton of research. They understood who they're talking to, and they understood what point of view they're coming in from. What is the day in the life of that individual like? What do they care about? And then product and technology always came last. I mean, it would be so many meetings that we would sit down and it would be conversational. It wouldn't be a presentation. I mean, we may have one or two slides as a backdrop, but it would always be a conversation of, well, thought provoking. Have you thought about this? Here's what I'm hearing. Here's what I'm seeing in the market. And that really pulled someone else in because it enticed them to really think. They came in with the expectation, I'm going to see another demo, and nobody bought off of a demo. Nobody has. And it's like, they fundamentally ran that cycle where I remember a rep closing a 7-figure deal, and he touted he'd only had done 6 demos, and it was mind boggling, but he was like, show it, sell it, hide it. And that started to really drive, because it didn't make sense, and sell at the right time was kind of the key.
And that's it. We all get trained to do the present, demo, propose, negotiate, close.
Right.
But, how many people want to buy that way?
We don't buy that way.
No.
We don't, right? Like, we as individuals, we go and look at reviews, right? We look for a social, associate from our social circle. Like, are we actually, like, are other people buying this stuff? In today's world, all the information, it's like everybody's stimulus rich, but context poor.
Yep.
And that really starts to kind of come to light of, we as individuals, we're humans. We're talking to another individual, and they just so happen to, that's their job that they do. And trying to sell them and say, here's a product that will solve this problem. It's like, in today's world, everybody's got problems. Everybody has problems.
Right.
And so helping them find the problems that they didn't even know about becomes the difference maker that I think has really helped kind of over my career of just sales.
Yeah, because I think you made a great point there with the high stimulus, but you talk to the people you trust.
Mm-hmm. People buy from who they like and trust, right?
Yeah. Because, I mean, if you were, let's say, in the market for a car and you have a friend who has a Tesla,
mm-hmm.
you talk about why you picked a Tesla. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it?
Yeah. And then you start to see it in your realm of, well, I take trips A and B. I can do that. I don't take as much road trips, but if he's able to take a road trip, that's a check in the box that I may want to do later on in the, and you start to build up the criteria in your head. And a lot of individuals are, I mean, even when you go buy a car, you already know what you're walking in. You know, typically the price, the car you want. You just need somebody to help facilitate a transaction.
By the time you get there.
By the time you get there, that's right.
Yeah. But like if it's something that you can't see on the internet, like redoing your kitchen or something,
mm-hmm.
and you got a friend who's a cabinet maker.
That's right.
You just pull them aside at a party and tell me what's the difference between this and why this, mm-hmm. why that.
That's the context piece that really comes in that I think that I've seen really, admire some really great reps of being able to say, like, your competence is highly dependent on context, and everybody's getting hit with marketing that says almost the same thing.
Right.
And so, as many times, I've done it as a rep, is we do the demo and they're like, I don't really see
the difference between this and what the way you're doing.
Yeah, the way you guys are doing. And I think the setup to that of reframing of, hey, here's what you're going to see. Here's what you're going to, see in the market. Here's what it probably means to you. But let me peel back the onion for you a little bit. Let me give you that additional flavor, just like those cabinets of, here's what, you don't really want to go with this wood versus you want to go with that wood. Like, those are the types of things that add value that become tremendously impactful.
Yeah. Now, as either a junior rep or first starting, people feel overwhelmed by that.
Mm-hmm.
But those meetings aren't they're an hour.
They used to be, right? I think nowadays
it's like 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Nobody has time for hour-long meetings, right? Yeah. And if they're spending an hour, there's a reason that they're spending an hour. Yeah. And I think that's been a massive shift since COVID. But even when you're starting out as a junior rep, just know that it's okay. Just put in the effort, right? And the effort and showing up sometimes, is one of the hardest parts. Is just like, just show up and just be prepared, put in the effort. And that comes through. That comes through when you're genuine and you're authentic about it and you really care about the customer.
Right. Because I think they do want to talk all day about themselves, mm-hmm. their issues, what they're facing.
That's right.
And they want to learn, but they don't want a commercial.
That's right. right?
How long did it take you to get comfortable doing that?
I think it's an iterative process, right?
Yeah.
Throughout my career, I've, when somebody looks at the resume, they're like, man, you've jumped quite a bit. But when I look at it, I look at it as strategic thoughts of moving from one spot to another. And I've always pushed myself for a bigger role. I started out as a BDR, went to, I was rubbing elbows with the CEO in the same building. And he's like, hey, come be an AE for me for services. I figured out I didn't really like services, but I knew that realm. And I was able to round out that kind of, after a year there. Then I went back for software at a company called Monster that wasn't the energy drink, and had some of my best years there, closing 1.8 million in 8 days, and it was fantastic. But that was the progression of just year after year of wanting to be better and wanting to do more. Just dove into books, dove into things that what my end customer was going through, and then
Yeah.
backing into how I could help them.
Because a lot of reps don't get the better part.
Mm-hmm.
They get the more, and they look for the perfect way of doing it, the silver bullet, and then they look for the outcome. If they don't get the outcome, they go back and try and find another silver bullet. It's that middle piece of how well you do it.
It's falling in love with that boredom and routine, right? Just as like any professional athlete, like so I don't know if you've seen Formula One on Netflix. Like they have routines. They have the boredom that they get, enjoyment out of. It's that middle part of that makes that outcome so great. Some of the greatest, like Kobe and Michael Jordan, they put in the work, and all of that. The sales is a profession, so I'm trying to be the best version of myself, and all the outcomes will follow.
Yeah.
And I was kind of able to kind of flip that of make the outcomes like the sales and the closed deals just a byproduct of what you do.
That's the difference.
Right.
See, people think the outcome is solely dependent on the performance,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not. Sometimes the performance could be awesome and the outcome mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
But
and sometimes they leave it up to chance. It's like I checked all the boxes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I see that the list all the time. And it's like, okay, you get all the boxes, but so did the competitor. And so did no decision. And what tends to happen after like 5 years, people get in the I don't have to practice because I know how to sell.
That's when some of the other reps that have been, putting in the work, been doing these video emails, they're latching on, following them on Twitter, following them on social, understanding them at a whole different level, end up beating the product seller, right?
Yeah. And I had the great opportunity to work with a great CEO, and we would go out the night before his presentation, which was less than an hour. He had it written down. He had all these pieces of paper. And then it was like midnight. We're ready to go home. And he goes, okay, I'm going to go back and go through this a couple more times. Let's meet for breakfast and do it one more time. This is a Stanford MBA. It was that level of commitment. And he'd given the same talk 100 times.
There's always room for improvement.
Right.
There always is.
Yeah. Because he was thinking like, what would you say to this? How could you misinterpret this?
Mm-hmm.
How can I make this clearer?
How does that make someone feel?
Yeah.
And when they walk away from that, right? How does that make someone feel? Because we've been in experiences where we walk away like, man, I remember how I felt. I don't remember what he said. I remember how he felt.
Yeah.
And what was that impact of that? And I think that was, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. I think that goes a long way.
And building that conversation is such a critical skill that no one either teaches or helps coach. Everybody's like, how to handle an objection. Well, by the time you get an objection, that conversation's already messed up.
That's right. That's right. And no one really teaches that. And it's almost digging deep to, in a book or, being able to say, how do I handle this? Like getting, having some self-reflection, being able to have those types of conversations. Also, just I think the books have been impactful, right? Not just sales books, but some personal development books of how do you as a human become better, and then being able to then reverse that out.
And what's the routine you go through? Let's say you have an A meeting later today or tomorrow.
Yeah. So just the way that I run that is I try to understand, obviously, who's in the meeting, what's the objective, what's our meeting control plan, what are we trying to achieve out of the meeting. But prior to that, I do a lot of research on the customer, right? Where is that customer? What's the market? Where are they headed? What is this individual responsible for? And if I've had enough time, if let's say I'm meeting with, typically majority of my meetings are with, VPs and C-suite. I would say probably 70% of my meetings are right around there on a weekly basis. And it seems high, but honestly, like that's where a lot of my focus has been. And that I start to realize who was in that role prior. And so I'll reach out to them on LinkedIn. Hey, I'd love to hear about your role and your experience at that previous company. I've got, and build that connection, because when you're reaching out to somebody to find just information and share, and then I take that, what I learned, and I apply that into the meeting of, hey, you're probably feeling like this. And I try to use the same language, right? The language that individual uses, that language and thought of the way that they talk, because I want to be able to come understand what is actually going on. How can we help? What are the problems that they're trying to solve? And then bring some thought leadership to it. I think that's the other piece of it. Here's what I'm seeing with all my other customers. Are you experiencing the same thing? Yeah. And so that meeting control is where kind of running it from top down of what do we want to achieve? What's the purpose, objective? And we reinstate that in the beginning. Hey, the purpose of why we're here today, the objective of when you walk away, this is what I'm hoping you walk away with. And getting that pulse check, just slowing down to speed up.
And using that word feel versus think.
Right. That's right.
I think we're giving humans too much credit by assuming they're thinking about it.
I think a lot of us, and I still, it's a innate ability, because we're just so taught to what's your next step? Where are you going with it? Like, you got to get them to a demo. And when that's the only thing that's on your mind as a rep, everything else comes out of your mouth becomes like that. It just naturally, that connotation, that tone, it feels like you're trying to get me to that demo. Like you want to show me something, and instead of what is it that we're peeling back the onion on? What have you tried already? Because they've probably already tried a lot of things. They already know about your product. They went to the website, and there's multiple buyers in the room. It's not just one person making a decision anymore, especially in enterprise.
Yeah. And I like the point about getting to the next step, your next step, not theirs.
That's right.
And
that's right.
And when you do that, who do you sound like? Do you sound like a partner, or do you sound like a sales rep?
You sound like a sales rep, right? You're just trying to get them to the next step and trying to progress them on your own timeline. I love the process of we have a sales process, correct, but you're not going to dictate the customer. The customer is not going to bend to your sales process.
Why would they?
They have no incentive,
right?
Zero incentive.
Yeah. So. It's like when you go to buy a car and they want your license and your keys, and you're like, I know why you want them, so I can't leave.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
And I think when you start acting like a salesperson, you get treated like one. Mm-hmm. You get the ghosting, you get we got to think about it. You get the shield that gets put up instead of the openness.
Yeah. Yeah. And you kind of fall in another bucket, right? Another bucket of someone that, if you're consistent, they'll follow up and say, yeah, well, grab some time, but it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah. Well, was there any other epiphanies that you had in developing your skills?
I would go back to what context are you coming in with, right? Yeah. Coming in with like the epiphany for me was people buy from who they like and trust.
So you were talking about people buy from the people they know, like, and trust.
Right.
And what got you to either realize that or internalize it? Because I think everybody knows it, but few people internalize it.
Yeah, I think just noticing how I buy, noticing how my friends and sphere of influence buy. At the end of the day, we're still selling to people, and knowing that, hey, how do I buy? Whether I'm buying an expensive software that is going to help my team, or whether I'm buying something that is a material personal thing. I've somehow, some way done the research. I've somehow, some way have reached out to friends and what they thought. I've reached out to trusted confidants. So whether I'm reaching out to my best friends about using a contractor, or I'm talking about a big software purchase, there's a sphere of influence. What that sphere of influence is typically of trusted advisors, and who are those trusted advisors that help steer that person in the right direction. And so being able to understand that if I'm on the outside looking in and they have some strategic vendors that they rely on, why don't I reach out and understand what they care about first, and what are those strategic vendors saying, and how are they aligning to that person's goals, and then starts to really kind of put together and formulate a plan.
And if there was one skill that you would like to take to the next level that you think would get you from where you are today to where you want to be, what would that be?
I think that's effective communication. I think, getting really good at what is the message, being concise. What is that 1% I want them to walk away with us, and focusing on that 1%, and getting really good at that. There's a lot of noise out there. And so sifting through that and being an effective communicator through stories. That's one of the things that I try to do, is tell a story, make them feel different, make them think different. That's a skill that I'm still trying to round out and still trying to get better at.
Yeah. And have you seen people either at your company or that you worked with in the past be really good at that?
I have. And it's not a skill that they've learned overnight. They have practiced, just like that CEO. You practice this pitch, you practice delivery of it, the performance of it,
yes,
of how you say things, how you're going to act when something happens, and sticking to that. That's the other aspect of, like, there's one thing in practicing, sticking to and saying something, but then when it actually happens in the meeting, sticking to those, what right?
Yeah.
And I've seen that over and over. They've practiced. A players always practice. Doesn't matter how many years they've been in the game, they practice.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. So LinkedIn /1KPat,